Welcome to BlitzCast, an NFL Draft podcast brought to you by NFLDraftBlitz.com. And now, your hosts, Alex Kavtov and Ed Hunt.
Welcome to BlitzCast number 81. We've got a big week in college football, Ed. The biggest matchup that everybody is talking about, the whole world is talking about, whether it's on the internet or television or radio stations, they're all talking about LSU versus Alabama. LSU is sitting right now at number 2 in the college football rankings that first came out. Alabama is at number 3 because it hasn't played anyone. But this is the matchup that everyone is looking forward to, and I'm excited to tune in on Saturday, Ed. So tell me about the preview. Let's start. Let's start with the biggest question, I guess. Will Tua Tagovailoa, will he be the starting quarterback? Will he play against LSU on Saturday?
See, I think Alabama's playing it coy here. I think they are trying to make it look like he might not play. They might have even had kind of like a fake meeting and made it look like they were telling the players that Tua's not going to play. I think Tua, he's had a high ankle sprain. He's had a few weeks off. Mac Jones has been doing the job, and so I think this is Tua's chance to come back and win the big game for Alabama.
Well, Alabama is at home, and we all know this. And Bovada Sportsbook has Alabama as the favorite, and they're going to be the favorite going into the game, right up until the end, the start of the game. So Alabama is the favorite at -6 at home against LSU. It's still very surprising. I mean, LSU has played 3 top 10 teams, and they beat Texas. They beat Florida. They beat Auburn. All those teams were ranked in the top 10 at that time. So LSU has faced stiff competition throughout. They've been through this before. They've played some really tough teams in the SEC especially. Tough defenses like Florida and Auburn. Alabama hasn't played anyone. They only played against Texas A&M, who is currently 6-3. They were ranked 24th overall when Alabama played them a few weeks ago. That's the only team that you can mention in this. The Crimson Tide have not been challenged in the SEC or just in this college football season.
Yeah, and I mean LSU is definitely on the opposite end of that. They've beaten some good teams. They've beaten some SEC. Good teams like They beat Texas, which is not an SEC team. They beat Auburn. They beat Florida. So, LSU has the better resume right now. But, Alabama has taken care of the teams that they were supposed to. So, you can't fault Alabama for having an easier schedule.
No, you can't fault them. I'm just asking the question. I mean, when you look at the record, I'm not surprised that Alabama is the favorite here. LSU has lost their last 8 meetings to Alabama. 5 out of those 6 meetings have been by double digits. Last time the LSU Tigers were 8-0, they haven't had such a record since 2011, which is actually the last time they defeated Alabama. And I remember that game. That was a defensive struggle, to say the least. It was a 9-6 game that LSU won. And it was just all about field goals and all about defense. And I don't think we're going to see this time. I mean, even if Tua doesn't play, or even if they alternate quarterbacks and he doesn't play every series out there, Alabama's backup quarterback is going to be just fine because he's got a great offense that he's operating in. And we all know about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. We all know about LSU's offense as well. So I anticipate this to be a high-scoring affair.
Yeah, I there is one thing. I mean, I want to maybe play a little devil's advocate. I think there is a scenario that LSU wins this game. And I think if Tua can't go and Mac Jones is the guy for Alabama, and Alabama's defense, isn't as good as they were last year. So I mean, this is more of an offensive team this year. So I can see a scenario where LSU wins this game. If you want me to, where I'm gonna bet on this game, I'm gonna bet on Alabama. But I really there is really a scenario, and I think it really comes down to what we've talked about at the beginning, which is whether Tua Tagovailoa is gonna play.
So you're covering all your bases, right? You're saying Alabama will win, but I see a scenario where LSU will win. So you're still picking Alabama, right?
But when I take a stand, I'm saying I think Alabama's going to win this game. I think Alabama's the better team.
I think that you're right. Alabama's defense hasn't been that terrific. Last year's team was better. Both of these teams have great defensive players that will play on Sunday, but it's going to be about the offense. And Joe Burrow has risen every occasion against top teams that they've faced so far. He did it against Texas, he did it against Florida, he did it against Auburn. He made plays when it mattered the most. So this is the best chance that the LSU Tigers have at beating Alabama. But Alabama had 2 weeks to prepare, and it's almost like Bill Belichick. You give him 2 weeks to prepare. Same thing with Saban. You give him 2 weeks to prepare. I would assume he's going to cover those bases, and he's going to have his defense ready. And even though my heart says LSU, and I should go with them because I've been really impressed by the way they've played, and I love the Joe Burrow story this year, and that offense has been terrific, I'm still going to go with Alabama because I can't go against Saban at home.
Well, I think either way. I mean, this is a really high stakes game. I mean, this pretty much whoever wins this game is the number one team in the country. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. Whoever comes out on top is going to jump to number one next week. There's no question about it. But let me throw out this out here. Whoever the winner is going to jump to number one. But if it's going to be a close game, Ed. If the losing team is going to lose by 7 or 10, do you anticipate that team still making the college football playoff?
Gosh, I could see Alabama still sneaking in and winning the SEC. I think it would be harder for LSU. I think it'd be a little bit harder for LSU. I think Alabama could still come back and win the SEC championship, whereas I think it'll be really tough for LSU to come back.
Even though everything that we've mentioned, that they've faced stiffer competition, that they've played against really quality opponents that have been in the top 10, you still believe that there's no way that Georgia will jump ahead of them.
Well, I think the committee is going to have a little bit of favoritism towards Alabama. I mean, even though there is, as kind of the dynasty, a committee like the college football committee is gonna want to put a team like Alabama in there because they're a big draw. I mean, they're the storied franchise, and that's gonna have a good narrative for college football. And I mean, we talk about this in the NFL with narrative, and I mean, I think it's college football is a business is just like the NFL is.
Let's move on to another big game this weekend. Not as big as the SEC showdown between Alabama and LSU, but let's talk about Penn State and Minnesota, a Big Ten showdown. I don't think, I would have imagined that Penn State would have been unbeaten up to this point, but there's no way that I would have anticipated that Minnesota would be unbeaten. Both teams are 8-0, and Penn State has just been terrific, Ed, especially on defense. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I when I look at this game with Minnesota, I mean, Minnesota hasn't really played anybody, whereas Penn State, has a great defense. I think Minnesota's won games because they can control the clock. Well, the problem is that Penn State is going to be able to stop the run, and it's going to be really hard for Minnesota to control the clock. So I actually don't. I'm impressed with the season that PJ Fleck has had, but I think this is kind of where it goes downhill after this game.
Well, let's give Minnesota some respect. You talked about their head coach PJ Fleck. He's gotten them to 8-0 here. He got a new contract extension up until 2026. It's almost like Minnesota is saying, "Hey, Florida State, stay away from our head coach." I mean, he's here. He's going to stay here for a while. Minnesota has run the ball really well. Rodney Smith has been carrying that offense. He was a guy that was supposed to be in the 2019 NFL draft if it wasn't for that injury. Now he's going to be in the 2020 NFL draft. He's been really impressive, especially the past 5 or 6 weeks. He's finally healthy, and he's putting up some huge numbers. Shannon Brooks, another player that has come back from injury, has been a nice compliment in that run game. Obviously, it's all about the running game, and that's how Minnesota has won. And their quarterback has gotten better. Seems like he's gained more confidence, but Penn State's defense, it's all about stopping the run. It's about getting after the quarterback. I think they're going to wear down Minnesota's offense, especially in the second half when they would have to put the ball in their quarterback's hands. And it's just, I don't see that happening. Penn State has too much speed. They have too much playmaking ability on defense. I wouldn't say that their offense has impressed me much. I mean, they've been decent, above average, but it's all been about that defense. Penn State Nittany Lions are just bringing the fire, and I think they're going to beat Minnesota pretty handily. What do you think about that?
You know, I feel like this is the type of game where I kind of take the under. I think a lot of both teams are kind of going to play the ball control game, and I think it's going to be a low scoring, high defense kind of affair. So you know, if I'm taking the over under, I'm taking the under in this game.
You know, obviously Bovada has Penn State as the favorite in this game over Minnesota, -7. So obviously Ed is taking the under. He's giving Minnesota a bit of a chance here. Let's talk about.
I meant the under, like you know, when you say over under, like how many points scored. That's what I meant. But
so the total points. But you're taking Penn State in this game.
No,
you're going to take the points.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Nittany Lions in this game. Yeah, I guess I wasn't clear about that.
I apologize about that. Let's talk about the big news that came out of the South. That FSU decided to pull the trigger on their head coach, Willie Taggart, after he didn't even finish the 2 full seasons at FSU. This was the head coaching candidate that they went after. They bought him out. They brought him from Oregon thinking that he was going to be the savior. He was going to be the big-time recruiter, and he was going to bring Florida State to its heyday. And that certainly didn't happen, especially after that embarrassing performance against the Hurricanes on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Willie Taggart needed to be fired, and I don't think it would have helped if he had stayed any longer. This was a total disaster. I mean, there was stories about how they had, you know, difficulty getting the right personnel on the field. You know, they were an embarrassment. You expect Florida State to be a good ACC team, and you know they really haven't. I mean, they've been one of the worst teams in the ACC, and you know, just when you know, this is the program of Bobby Bowden, and you know, he hasn't you know, I mean, it's really gone downhill, and so you know, I'm hoping there's a couple coaching candidates that I'd like to see go in there and you know fix the job and you know get them back to where they belong.
FSU hasn't been the same ever since Jimbo Fisher left, and I guess there was something to it. Fisher knew something was going on. After he won that national championship with Jameis Winston, it seemed like he didn't get everything that he asked for from the administration, and there was a reason why he left for Texas A&M. Obviously, he believed that FSU was on the decline, and he left to Texas A&M. They get Taggart. That certainly didn't work out. So let's talk about your top coaching candidates for the FSU job, which is still, you know, it's still an attractive job. I mean, Florida is a hotbed when it comes to recruits. I would love to compete against Florida and the Miami Hurricanes and UCF. I know I can still get the recruits to Florida State because I've got a big-time school with the name.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's really one name that I really like. I really like Lane Kiffin. You know, he won.
Ouch!
Yeah.
Ouch, Ed? Are you kidding?
No, seriously. Hear me out at least. You know, he won at Tennessee. He won at a big program like USC. he was there during the Reggie Bush sanctions, and the fact that he, basically like had his one hand tied behind his back while he was at USC and still was able to function there. That was obviously why he didn't stick around, but
he got fired, didn't he, Ed?
Yeah, he got fired, but
his best heyday was with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart when he was the offensive coordinator under Pete Carroll. When he returned as the head coach, I don't think he had the success that anybody anticipated. Obviously, the expectations were sky high, but it's not like Lane Kiffin hit a home run out of the park when he was USC's head coach. He didn't do the same thing at Tennessee. He only stuck around for 1 year, and I believe he was 7-6. He's had some success at, obviously, where he is right now at Florida Atlantic, but that's about it, Ed.
Well, the fact is that recent history has shown that he is a coach on the upswing again. He was on the downswing, a few years ago when he got he went to Florida Atlantic, and I think he's done a good job, and I think he's redeemed himself. He knows that Florida area, so he can recruit that area. He's going to have a bigger name like Florida State. I think he is a favorite, but there's a few other guys that are interesting names. I mean, I wouldn't just give him the job. I mean, I think there are some guys I'd want to interview. We talked about PJ Fleck, and what he's done with the Minnesota Gophers. If he can win this Penn State game, and he can win some games in the Big Ten the rest of the way, I mean, he could be a very attractive coaching candidate. And I know he signed an extension, but could it? I mean, to get a job at Florida State, I mean that would be a prime coaching job for a guy like PJ Fleck. Another guy. I mean, I like is Jeff Brom. He's from Purdue. He turned down the Louisville job to stay at Purdue. Purdue hasn't performed as well this year, but they've had a lot of injuries, and I think they had a good week last week. So I like him. He's kind of the guy who they think is going to go for a big job. They've talked about him as an NFL guy. But, Florida State, I mean, Florida State is a big job. It's almost, it's maybe not quite an NFL job, but it's pretty much, it's big-time college football. So, I mean, this would be a step up from Purdue. And, I mean, Big Ten and ACC, I mean, it's not a huge drop. It's not a huge change in competition. I mean, they're relatively equal conferences. I mean, maybe the Big Ten's a little bit better, but FSU will be a little easier to recruit at. So I think Jeff Brom is a good candidate.
I like those two candidates better than Lane Kiffin. I just think Lane Kiffin would be a PR nightmare for FSU. It goes a lot deeper than that. They want a clean guy out there, and Lane he talks way too much, especially on Twitter. I wouldn't want a head coach like that for the FSU job. I want to kind of get a guy that's going to be all about football, that's going to get that program organized. I mean, you mentioned that it was a mess under Willie Taggart on the field and off the field, and they need a guy that will be able to organize everything around it. I used to watch FSU a lot in the 90s and early 2000s when the team dominated. And I remember a fast, aggressive defense that just got after people. It sacked quarterbacks. It had fast linebackers. It had guys in the secondary that went to the NFL. And that's what I want FSU to go back to. I want them to bring that mean-spirited, fast, stingy defense onto the field. So I'm going with the defensive coach, Ed. I liked your last two candidates with Fleck and Brom, but I'm going to go after a hot defensive coordinator like Brent Venables. All right, Venables has been a great defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. He's turned around Clemson, and he's waiting for that right job to open up. I think FSU is that job. I want a guy that can recruit, that can get guys, and can coach them up. I think Venables would be my top candidate. My second guy would be a guy like Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell has turned that Cincinnati program around. He's a guy that he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State went to Cincinnati. It looks like he's going to have back-to-back 10-win seasons. Who would have thought that? It's a Cincinnati job, damn it. Another guy that's really good on defense that can bring that swagger back to FSU. And if I strike out with Venables or Luke Fickell, I guess I'm going to go with like Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops coached the secondary there for 3 years. He's gotten Kentucky off, playing pretty well. Last year, I think they went 10-3. This year, they're 4-4. Mike Stoops wouldn't be my first candidate, but at least he knows that program. I mean, he coached under Jimbo Fisher, and I think he's going to be able to bring that swagger. Another guy that's a defensive coach that's going to be able to recruit in the state of Florida. But FSU's job is just, it's still a good job, but it wasn't a sizzling job that it was a few years ago when Jimbo Fisher left. And I just think that Florida State kind of struck out with Willie Taggart. And now they have to redeem themselves right now. And I hope they're going to be able to find the big candidate. Obviously, they got a head start. I mean, they fired their head coach a couple of weeks before the season ends, and they want to get that head start, whether it's with the assistant head coach or whether with another head coach at another program. So I wish Florida State Seminoles a lot of luck in that regard. The college football, obviously, it's been an interesting season out there in the ACC Coastal division. It's been really unpredictable, Ed. We know that Clemson is going to win the ACC. They're the favorite team. Even whoever plays them in the ACC Conference championship game out of the Coastal Division, it's going to be an uphill battle for them. But Virginia right now leads the ACC Coastal Division. But we've got Miami, we've got Pitt playing pretty well. Who do you anticipate coming out of that division to face Clemson in the ACC championship game?
I think I see Virginia being the team there. Pitt was there last year, but I don't know. I don't know if they're quite the team. It is kind of a close race. Miami hasn't really been able to get it totally together in sort of the recent years. So, I would probably put Virginia as the favorite.
I'm going to go with the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes impressed me versus Florida State. They played them last week, and I just think that defense is getting things together. And those losses that they have, and the Canes are 5-4 right now, those losses that they had throughout the season, they've been close. They've been close in every game. And I think they're going to be able to finish the season on a high note. I think they'll overtake Virginia and actually give them a little bit of a chance against Clemson. I don't think it's going to be close, but I think that's the only team that can compete against Clemson because the Hurricanes still have a pretty good defense. So I'll take the Hurricanes in this unpredictable ACC Coastal Division. The college football playoff, obviously the rankings came out, Ed. What do you think about it? Ohio State is at number 1. LSU is at number 2. Alabama is at 3. Penn State grabbed a hold of the number 4 seed. The national championship team, Clemson, who won it last year, they're at number 5. And Georgia is at number 6. They obviously had a pretty good game against Florida last week. What do you think about the rankings? Do you have any problems with it? Do you think that LSU should have been number 1 ahead of Ohio State?
I think it's fine to put Ohio State first, but to be honest with you, it's just a very temporary thing. I mean, I think it's basically like it's not right to put LSU 1 if they're gonna go and lose to Alabama. At the same time, it wouldn't be fair to put Alabama first. So kind of by default, Ohio State's the number 1. I don't have a problem with it. I think Georgia can kind of sneak in there. I picked them to be in it, and they could very well come back. I mean, they lost a game against South Carolina, but I mean that game feels a little bit like a fluke. So I think they definitely deserve to be number 6. So yeah, I mean, I just the team that sort of needs to really run the table the rest of the way is Oklahoma. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's an uphill battle for them because you still have Clemson, you still have Georgia, You have Oregon being there as well. So Oklahoma, there are a lot of things that need to fall in the right place for the Sooners in order for them to get back in the race. And I anticipate them to win the Big 12 title, but I don't think they can challenge. There are too many favorites ahead of them. And the Big 12 conference, it's not great in terms of the strength of the schedule. And even that Texas win doesn't look that good right now because the Longhorns have struggled. So, the Sooners, I don't anticipate the Sooners getting back into this race because there are a number of teams that are lurking around behind those four, including, obviously, Clemson and Georgia. Let's recap the game. Georgia against Florida. The Bulldogs won the game 24-17. The defense sure looked ready for that late push for an SEC title. It suffocated Florida's run game. It held them to a tune of 19 total yards on the ground, Ed. There was a lot to like about Georgia's performance. I know you like Jake Fromm in that game as well.
Yeah, I thought he played good towards the end. I really credit Kirby Smart for staying aggressive at the end of the game because Florida could have come back in that game, and the fact that Kirby Smart stayed aggressive at the end of the game, I'm seeing that more in the NFL, and I'm seeing teams close out games more in the NFL. But it was good to see that at the college level too, that teams aren't just folding and giving the other team the ball and just trying to take off as much time off the clock. I thought it was good game management at the end by Georgia. Georgia was the better team, and Florida is a very good. It was a very good football school, but I thought they ran the ball. I thought Georgia ran the ball pretty well too. So I give Georgia a lot of credit in that game.
Jake Fromm had a solid game. He just managed the game, completed 20 of 30 passes for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Dogs were dominant on third down. They really were. And I have to say this, Lawrence Cager, the wide receiver who transferred from Miami, continues to be the difference maker out there for that wide receiver group. And he was one of the top non-QB transfers of the 2019 season. I was really impressed with him. He has been Jake Fromm's favorite target, especially late when they need to get that play. Cager continues to make those plays. Oregon beat USC, Ed, but they really trounced USC. I mean, the score was 56-24. Justin Herbert played a good game, but Oregon couldn't get the run game going at all. It needs to find the balance on offense. You can't just rely on Justin Herbert to deliver it. But it's the defense. I didn't think that anybody played defense in the Pac-12 besides the Washington Huskies, but Oregon came up big, and they nabbed 4 takeaways against USC in that game.
See, I think Oregon's a good team. I picked them to win the Pac-12, and I think they're very much in the hot seat to win. I mean, they're in the front seat to win the Pac-12. I mean, they're up there in the north, and I don't know if there's really a South team that can really challenge them. I mean, maybe Utah. So I think things look really good for Oregon to win the Pac-12. Do I see them being in the college football playoff? Probably not. They're going to get hammered for that Auburn loss, and that's kind of why they play that Auburn game, because if they win that Auburn game, then they're in then that's their ticket to the college football playoff. But that's how a Pac-12 team gets into the college football playoff. But other than that, I'm really impressed with Oregon, and I'm really if I'm an NFL team, thinking about the draft, I give Justin Herbert a good look before I take Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, I know the Miami Dolphins slogan has been tank for Tua, but I generally, and I've said this on Twitter, as why not tank for Justin Herbert? I mean, he's been more consistent. I think he's he may not have the upside, but he has the starting experience. I mean, I think he can step in right away for you.
Look, both guys have the upside. Both guys are really talented players, and both guys bring something to the table. Justin Herbert is more the traditional pocket passer, but he's a really good athlete with that strong arm and that size. And he's a really smart kid. And obviously Tua with his deep ball, and his ability to make plays. He's a dual threat type of QB. So, yeah, the Dolphins are going to have a tough decision there. And you know what? The Bengals are lurking around, Ed. I'm sure they're going to be picking number 2. And whoever the fallback option is, I don't think they would mind. I mean, it would definitely be better than what Andy Dalton has been for them for, the past 5 or 6 years. So I think both teams are rubbing their hands a little bit and saying, hey, two good quarterbacks out there in the 2020 NFL draft. Let's switch to the NFL, Ed. The Browns were the hot topic in the offseason. People were picking them to win the AFC North, picking them to make the playoffs, maybe be a dark horse for the Super Bowl. I kept saying, don't jump to conclusions. They haven't won anything. They've got a rookie head coach. They've got a second-year quarterback. They've got Odell Beckham, who's got some problems coming in. It's just everything needed to come together. John Dorsey, we know what he did in the offseason. He listened to his QB. He saw that Freddie Kitchens was a difference maker as an offensive coordinator for them after Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were let go. For some reason, they decided to go with Freddie Kitchens because they felt like they were going to lose him. Maybe another team was going to jump and they were going to lose him later on. Instead of going with Greg Williams, who improved that team to a 5-3 record, they decided to go with the hot offensive coordinator that only called the plays for half of the season before that. And here it is. I mean, it's a messy situation. The Browns are 2-6. They've lost 4 straight games. They lost to the Denver Broncos, Ed. The Denver Broncos weren't starting Joe Flacco. Brandon Allen, who's never taken a regular season snap for them, led the Broncos to a win. And the Browns were actually better. They committed less penalties than the Broncos. They didn't have turnovers, but they still somehow lost the game. What's going on, Ed? And there's a lot of talk out there, fire Freddie Kitchens. Is Dorsey going to admit that he made a mistake, and will they get rid of Kitchens if they don't improve at the end of the season?
I'm not usually one to come down on the coach so early, but Freddie Kitchens inherited a team with a lot of talent, and there's a lot of guys on this team who are not performing. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., been a decent receiver, you expect better from him. Jarvis Landry, I have high hopes for him. I think he's a very talented receiver. Has been very, decent, not great. Denzel Ward, not impressed with him. There have been some guys, like Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, and Olivier Vernon who have been good. But you know what? He's not getting the most out of his players. And the fact is that, he inherited a talented team, and so he was supposed to win right away. I can kind of understand why Browns fans are saying, let's fire Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah, it's the same old Browns, Ed. Look, a lot of talent on paper, a lot of individual guys that just have big names. Obviously, there was a lot of optimism around Baker Mayfield after he threw for 27 touchdowns during his rookie season, which was a record. He was a runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's on TV every time I turn it on, Ed, but he's certainly not playing quarterback like he should. I mean, this is a guy that has thrown, 26 interceptions in 21 games that he has started. He needs to take care of the ball, but the Browns need to block better up front. That offensive line has been terrible all year. Last year it was good. This year it's been terrible. And Freddie Kitchens has been over his head, to be honest with you. Penalties, bad clock management, turnovers. He is in over his head. He doesn't know what he's doing out there, Ed, to be honest with you. And it's just one of those times that you promoted a guy that just wasn't ready to become a head coach in the NFL, because that's a huge responsibility. And whenever he's giving out answers at his press conference, it looks like he's a dying man out there. It looks like he has already given up and realized his fate, and he doesn't want to fight for it. This is his chance to kind of improve the team to 8-8, because you really do have an easy schedule in the second half of the season, but they've got to play better. They got to protect Baker. They got to give the ball to Nick Chubb more, because he's their best player right now. He is playing like he's the top player on offense, not Baker Mayfield. And they need to get the ball to Odell, especially in the end zone. I mean, his numbers are atrocious in the red zone. Just throw it up to the guy. I mean, he can jump out of the gym and come down with the ball, and I don't know what they're doing. And to be honest with you, the worst part about it is Freddie Kitchens kept his offensive play calling duties, and it's just too much on his plate. He's calling the plays, and he's trying to manage the team as a head coach. A lot of great head coaches can do that, just not Freddie Kitchens, Ed.
You know, part of me wonders, like, I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast, but, you know, Greg Williams kind of rubs me the wrong way, especially watching him on Hard Knocks. But to be honest with you, I think he might have been a good option for them as a coach. You know, the thing is I think he would be a, you know, sort of that exciting sort of alpha male, you know, motivator, and I think that maybe that's what they needed. You know, I know a lot of these teams want an offensive guy. And you know, Greg Williams might have been more of a defensive guy, but you know, you'd have a defensive coach in Greg Williams, and then you'd have a team with a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. You know, he did well when he was the interim, and he's one of the reasons why, you know, there was a lot of hope for the Browns last year. So, to be honest with you, I'm being Monday morning quarterback, and I'm saying you should have stuck with Greg Williams.
Yeah, Greg Williams is off at being a defensive coordinator. At another job, he certainly didn't get a fair shot at this job out here. You know, he's been a great assistant through the years. Obviously, he's a hard-nosed coach. He rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but he was a head coach before, previous stops at Buffalo. He had success with the Tennessee Titans as the defensive coordinator, and he was the difference maker last year because he took that mess and improved them to 5-3 when he was the head coach. And for some reason, many people gave the credit to Freddie Kitchens because he got Baker right, and that offense started clicking. But Greg Williams did not get the respect, and he was the head coach of that team. Nick Foles will start for the Jags, Ed. And especially after that performance that Gardner Minshew, I mean, he came up short in London against the Texans. It obviously looks like the right move for the Jags.
Yeah, you know, Nick Foles, when I kind of thought about it, I thought this is the right move, and I thought it was because Nick Foles played really good in the Week 1 performance, you know, for the Jags. And so, you know, Nick Foles deserves to get the job. But you know what? I do think Gardner Minshew as a number 2 at this point in his career, I think he is a good number 2, and I think they should stick with him as a number 2. But you know, and I think they have a better quarterback situation than they've had in a couple of years. So, you know, you roll with Nick Foles. Maybe you know, Nick Foles has a little bit of that magic in him. You know, he seems to be more of a winner than sort of, you know, just this great talent. But you know, I know I was kind of banging, you know, maybe we said it off air, maybe we said it on this podcast, but I was kind of sort of more banging the drum for Gardner Minshew. But you know, now I'm kind of feeling like Nick Foles should be the guy.
Well, I mean, they're going with the experienced guy, and they are in that race. I mean, they're not out of it. The Colts just lost, the Texans won. The Jags are within the reach of the playoffs. They can get in there. And obviously Nick Foles gives them the best opportunity because Leonard Fournette looks like he's rejuvenated. He got himself conditioned. He's running well. That defense looks like, I'm not saying the same that it looked like 2 years ago, but it's close. It's not that same mess that it was last year. They got rid of Jalen Ramsey, and that defense is playing together as a unit. And so Nick Foles is kind of that game manager who's been there before in the playoffs. He gives them the best chance to win right now. If Minshew would have had a great game against the Texans, I would have stuck with him. But right now, obviously, he took a step back a little bit. He has been great, but you got to go with the more experienced starter in Nick Foles. Let's talk about another quarterback, Ed, and I'm curious what you think about this situation. The Panthers put Cam Newton on IR, and my question to you is, Kyle Allen is playing well. We're not sure that he's the long-term answer. They drafted Will Grier in the 2019 NFL draft to possibly take over as the starter down the road. Do you think Cam Newton has played his last game in the Panthers uniform?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I would do is I would stick with Cam Newton for another year because he's been a great quarterback for them for so long. I mean, he has a foot injury. It's not like he has this, sort of, like it's not like something that's like in his neck or his spine where, his career is like totally over. I mean, he's had a lot of injuries and he's taken a lot of hits. I'll take that. But, Alyssa Frank, I mean, he can come back from that. And the fact of the matter is that I think Kyle Allen has done the job, but I want to see if they get out of the playoff picture, I want to see Will Grier get a shot. I want to see what Will Grier can do, and you know what, maybe if Will Grier can do it, then maybe you let Cam Newton go or something like that, or at least if you know what you have in Will Grier. Then you can know if you want to take a quarterback, because this is a better quarterback class than we thought. I mean, there's 4 or 5 options you can go with, and I think the Panthers will have enough of a pick that if they want one of these, maybe they won't get Justin Herbert or Tua, but I mean they can get one of these, sort of first round quarterbacks if that's the way they want to go. But I think it all really starts with giving Will Grier a chance.
I think they're going to move on from Cam Newton. First of all, let's start with the money that he's owed. He only has 1 year left on his contract. He's 30 years old, and if the Panthers cut him in the offseason, they will only carry like $2 million in dead money. So basically, it's a cap-friendly deal for the team. And to be honest with you, Newton, to me, is a mere shell of the player who defined the dual threat quarterback in the NFL. He's been hit more times than any quarterback since the 2011 season, ever since he entered the league. And it's just those hits have really taken its toll on his body. And it's not only about this year, Ed. He's had injuries. He's played through them. His production has really taken a hit. Since losing the Super Bowl to Denver, I mean, I look at the ESPN stats here. Newton ranks 30th in total quarterback rating, just behind Andy Dalton and ahead of Blake Bortles of the Los Angeles Rams. That's crazy, Ed. I mean, the production hasn't been there. He's been hurt. And you can't live in the past. You really can't. The face of that franchise now is Christian McCaffrey. I think that's pretty obvious. That's who the Panthers are building their team around, and Kyle Allen is more of a game manager, and they need to spend their money elsewhere. They need to spend it on Christian McCaffrey. They need to re-sign a guy like Shaq Thompson, Gerald McCoy, James Bradbury. They can put that money elsewhere, and I just think Newton's time has run out. He's been great for that franchise. He led them to the Super Bowl, and Superman has been great, but I just don't think we'll see Cam Newton play the same after this. It's not a catastrophic injury, but he's taken so many hits and he's had so many injuries that I think his body is not of a 30-year-old man. And that's why I think Newton is going to move on. He's going to get his shot elsewhere. And to be honest with you, if I was the Bears or the Bengals, I would look at him because this guy has won in the NFL, and especially the Bears. I mean, I would try to kind of get a quarterback in there who can actually win games. And I think Newton will definitely be an upgrade over a guy like Mitchell Trubisky.
I love that idea, Cam Newton to the Bears. I mean, I think that would be a great fit for him.
I just think it makes too much sense. I don't think he's going to ask for a lot of money, and I think the Bears will be ready to move on from the Mitchell Trubisky experiment. I think they're going to be ready to put him on the back burner. They'll put him on the sideline if they don't cut him or trade him. I don't think they will. I think Cam Newton will be the right guy for that team because they still have a good defense, and I think if Nagy can design his offense around the running game a little bit, I think they'll be able to do some things there. So I think Cam Newton to the Bears. You heard it here first, and I think it's not a bad idea. Let's get to the scouting reports, Ed. You keep talking about quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and there's another quarterback out here that we need to talk about because he has improved this year. Watching him from his first game to his second game, and now he's a different quarterback that's playing with some confidence out there. And his name is Jacob Eason. He's the quarterback of the Washington Huskies, who actually got his start with the Georgia Bulldogs. He was a starter during his freshman season. He started 12 games, and he actually was going to be the starter during that sophomore season, but he got hurt during the first game. We all know how that ended up. Jacob Fromm took over. He led them to the national championship game, and that was the end of that. Jacob Eason was looking for a team that he could transfer to, and he decided to transfer back home. He's from Washington, and the Huskies took him, and he won the starting job this year. He is eligible for the 2020 NFL Draft, and there's some buzz building out there that he might sneak into the first round. So let's talk about his strengths and weaknesses, Ed.
Well, I think the first strength you have to talk about is this guy is long and he has a rocket arm. This is a guy who has a lot of potential. I see very much like a Josh Allen in him. I think that would be sort of my comparison. I'm not particularly. I don't think I'm as high on him as you. I didn't say that I'm high on him. I said that there's a lot of buzz building on him. Before I give my opinion, I didn't say that. I just think that there is some buzz, and I remind our listeners, Josh Allen, even though we trashed him during our scouting reports leading up to that NFL draft, I mean, he still went 7th overall to the Buffalo Bills. And if you look at all the quarterbacks right now from that quarterback class, right, Ed? He's the one winning. It's not because of him. Buffalo has a great defense. But when you look at the Baker Mayfield situation, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen is probably in the most stable situation right now, and the Buffalo Bills are 6-2. So it's all about going to the right place, right, Ed? Well, I think there's a couple of quarterbacks that I would take over Josh Allen still. I'm a little bit. I think Lamar Jackson is proving himself, and I think Baker Mayfield. I think he's still the long-term option in Cleveland, where the other quarterbacks I'm less worried. I'm less certain about. But the point is that I think he is that sort of high risk, high reward quarterback. He's got a big arm. He has shown in certain games, like against Oregon, which is an important game, that he can have better ball placement. I've seen him fit passes into tight windows. I've seen him, just be a better quarterback in certain games. But I have a lot of concerns, and I'd like to get into them. All right, let's do this. Obviously, you mentioned his top strengths. I mean, you really did. It's about the size, it's about the arm strength, it's about him getting rid of the ball quickly. He can avoid pressure. He's not a statue in there. He can buy some time in the pocket. He's a lot more mobile that he gets credit for. He's no Josh Allen, but he can avoid pressure out there. But let's get to the weaknesses. Let's get to the concerns that you have about him. Well, I think he's very hot and cold in terms of accuracy. I think he needs better ball placement. I think he needs a better internal clock. I think he holds the ball too long. I think he needs to make better reads. And to be honest with you, just certain times I think he likes to throw the bullet pass, and he likes to show off his strong arm. But he just isn't accurate. He isn't putting the ball where the receiver needs it. And he almost like looks like he's playing uncontrolled. It reminds me of Drew Lock tape, and it kind of reminds me of Josh Allen tape as well. Well, let's continue. He doesn't work through his progressions. He kind of locks on to his primary target. A lot of predetermined reads in that offense. He needs to step into his throws a lot more. There's a lot of arm action happening, but he needs to get his lower body into it. A lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL will do that. He's got to work on that. His footwork, his throwing motion, he's got to get it in sync. I get it. He trusts his arm. It's a great arm, and he can fit the ball into a tight spot, but
again, all the great quarterbacks in the NFL, they step into those throws. They use their lower body. He needs to make better decisions because at times he's just going to trust his arm too much. He locks onto his primary guy. And yeah, there are a lot of things out there. This is a guy, again, who started his freshman season at Georgia. He started for almost a full season here at Washington. So this is a guy who will have over 25 starts. But I think there are a lot of decision makers, a lot of teams out there in the NFL that are going to get excited about him. They're going to be like, damn, look at him. He's got all these physical tools. We can get him better with our quarterback guru, and he's going to get him right. And I think that's why there are going to be a couple of teams that will fall in love with him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, too, about him is that he can really flash. Like, when he's on, he can look like a really good quarterback. Like, I just, there were a couple games, the Oregon game, he looked pretty good. And actually, the Florida game in 2018, he could really have some great ball placement. And so that almost kind of makes this almost like a confusing pick because, I mean, it just not so much a confusing pick, but it's an attractive pick. And if I'm a team, and maybe like I'm looking for a quarterback I can develop, maybe take a risk, and I can afford to take a risk. I mean, maybe like a day 2, like a 3rd round pick, maybe like where Will Grier was drafted. I mean, I think this is that would be where he would be a good value pick. I know that there's going to be one team that's going to like him and is going to want to take him in the 1st round or early 2nd.
I think he is going to be in play at the end of the 1st round. And if he's a good kid and if he checks all the boxes off the field, I think there might be a team that will be willing to move up and trade up for him. And that's why I'm saying that keep an eye on him. It's just, Jacob Eason is an interesting player because he has gotten better, Ed. If you turn on the tape, like in the beginning of the season against Cal, and if you see him against Oregon, that was a game that happened recently, it is a different quarterback. You see the development. You saw a guy that was a bit rusty in the beginning of the season, and you see a more developed and fine-tuned quarterback who's feeling more comfortable in that offense against Oregon. They lost that game, but he did have an outstanding game. That was one of his better games, just period. Against Stanford, he struggled. He struggled making good decisions. He threw a pick that he shouldn't have thrown. And that's why I'm saying that there are times that he's going to trust his arm too much. And when defenders when he locks those eyes on his primary target and the defender can read his eyes, he will jump that route. In the NFL, they do that really well. So he's got to manipulate defenders. He's got to understand coverage. And that's something he still needs to learn. He's definitely he's definitely a project, but he is a guy that will intrigue a few teams out there.
Yeah.
Let's go with...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to go to Okwara, but yeah, I mean, he's a high risk, high reward, Josh Allen, Drew Lock type. So, I want to talk about Okwara.
Let's talk about the defensive end / outside linebacker Julian Okwara from Notre Dame. His brother actually plays for the Detroit Lions. He's been in the league for a couple of seasons. Nothing flashy, but he was able to make the team and contribute to that Lions team. So let's talk about the younger brother. Let's talk about Julian.
Well, the first thing I have to think is he has to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. He cannot be a defensive end in a 4-3 front. He is just not big enough. His game just doesn't fit that. One of the things I'm seeing is he gets overpowered in the run game. He's just overpowered in the run game as, a guy who plays at the line of scrimmage with his hand in the dirt. I can't see that happening. There are some things that I like about him, though. I think he's a good speed rusher. I think he could have a very good first step. If you need to have him sort of come in on, sort of a nickel down and, you can rely on his good first step. You can rely on his bend. You can rely on his speed. But, I mean, he has to add weight and strength because he really is too small.
No, he's a 3-4 outside linebacker, Ed. And, if you're going to be 250, 255, play 3-4 outside linebacker, I think you're going to be fine. He's a good athlete, but I just don't think he plays that fast on the football field. I think his numbers at the scouting combine are going to be a lot better than what I see on the football field. He's just not a terror off the edge. He's not a guy that finishes plays. He needs to get those tackles for loss. He needs to get those sacks. He's around the quarterback, but I just don't see him making impact plays. And I watched about 4 of his games, and I just don't see it. He needs to maintain his gap responsibility against the run. The one thing that's kind of encouraging is he can cover. He looks fluid in coverage. He looks like it's not foreign to him. He looks like a guy that can change directions. So that's why I'm saying he's a good athlete. He's going to test well, but I'm not sure he plays that fast on the football field.
Yeah, I think. It all comes back to like putting on weight. I mean, I have him listed at 220. I mean, he needs to at least put on 20 pounds of, a muscle, and even if he puts on a little fat, I mean, it just get, he needs to just get bigger if he wants to play that edge in the NFL. I mean, he is going to be an outside linebacker, but he has the skills to be an edge rusher, and so I don't think he's like the 4-3 outside linebacker. I think he's more the 3-4 outside linebacker.
Yeah, probably. I mean, absolutely. Let's see what they have him listed. Actually, on ESPN.com, they have him listed at 248. I'm not saying that's like accurate out there. I don't know what they have him on his bio page, like for Notre Dame out there, but ESPN, he's listed at 248. And the Notre Dame also, the website has him listed at 248. He's 6'4", 248. And even if he's about 240, I mean, to me, he doesn't look like a guy that's about 220, 225 when I'm watching tape. I mean, even when you compare him to like Brian Burns from last year, and Brian Burns was like 225 at best. He's a lot skinnier than Okwara. I wanted to get that out of the way. I believe that he is going to play 3-4 outside linebacker. I think that's his most natural position, but he's not as skinny as you have him listed. And yeah. I pulled up a couple of websites out there.
Yeah, I think unless he really lights up the strength numbers at the combine, I think he'll do well in the agility drills and the speed drills and the 40 time. But if he lights it up in the strength drills, then I would think about him as a first rounder. But other than that, I'm really thinking about him as a day 2 guy.
Yeah, I don't see him like sneaking into anywhere. Actually, I have him more as like a 4th round guy, Ed.
I mean,
because
that's fair. I can understand that.
From a production standpoint, he's a guy that might get pushed up because of his testing numbers, but I just can't put him into day 1 or day 2 conversation. I just can't. From after watching his tape and after watching him during his Notre Dame games live, a couple of games, obviously, we see Notre Dame play high-profile games like Georgia and and teams like that. I just don't see a guy that's making an impact. You need to make an impact, Ed, in order for you to be in the conversation for a high first or early day 2 pick.
Yeah, I mean there are things though that I mean he does have that bend, and I mean teams like a good bend, and he has a quick first step, so I legitimately, I would support a team that wants to take him in the 3rd round. I'd support a team that wants to take him in the 3rd round.
All right, let's talk about a couple of interesting NFL games to close out the show, Ed. Panthers versus Packers. Bovada has the Packers as the favorite in this game, minus 5.5. The Packers didn't have a good game last week. They fell flat, to be honest with you. I don't even know what happened. Can they bounce back against the Panthers this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, so I think it could be very possible. I mean, remember the Panthers are, Kyle Allen has done decent, but the Panthers are really playing with a number 2 quarterback, so I give the edge to the Packers in this game.
The only remaining undefeated team in the NFL right now are the San Francisco 49ers. And Bovada has them at -6 at home against the Seahawks. Will San Francisco continue to dominate? I liked what I saw from Jimmy G. Garoppolo was great during last week's game. He was on fire and on point. It was probably the best game that I saw him play in a 49ers uniform. But the Seahawks, Ed, this is a huge matchup. The Seahawks against the 49ers.
Yeah, I thought that they really favored the 49ers, and I think Vegas is trying to give the 49ers some respect, but the 49ers have been great. But I mean, the Seahawks are a really good team, and this is a division matchup, and they're gonna put their best foot forward. And I think Russell Wilson's had a great year. I think there's a lot of positives on the Seattle team. So I think this comes down to a close game. And so I don't think the 49ers cover. That's what I'm saying.
I think the Seahawks are going to win this game, period. This isn't about the spread. I think Russell Wilson is my favorite for the MVP award. He's playing great. He's just, everything is happening so naturally for him. He looks like the best quarterback in football right now. With all due respect to Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson is playing lights out. And I think he's going to be the difference maker here. And I think the 49ers will suffer their first loss on Monday night. As much as I hate to admit that, but I think it's going to happen. The Seahawks will come out with the win behind Russell Wilson. Ed, what happened with the Ravens and the Patriots? I just wanted to mention that at the end of the show. Lamar Jackson looked like the best player on the football field. The Patriots couldn't get anything going in the first half, and Brady didn't look like his old self. I mean, it looked like, in my opinion, the Patriots should have been ready. I would assume that Bill Belichick was going to show the entire NFL how to cover, how to defend Lamar Jackson, and it didn't happen, Ed. Lamar Jackson ran wild, and the Patriots defense struggled for the first time this season.
Well, I have two explanations for why the Patriots lost this game. One, they were playing the Ravens on the road, and I think the Ravens were just more hyped for this game. And the other reason is I think the Patriots, I think this game was kind of a black swan. I think that the Patriots just didn't play their best football, and the Patriots have had these regular season games where they just haven't brought it. And I mean, they are the best in the business, but they just didn't bring it. But I think you do bring up a good point. I mean, is how do you stop Lamar Jackson? I mean, it seems like if he doesn't have anything downfield, he can just run the ball, and it just seems like keeping a spy there, it isn't working. And so it's gonna take some time, but eventually someone's gonna have to figure out how to defend that. And I don't know if it's gonna be McVay in Los Angeles, or if it's gonna be Belichick getting a second try. But someone's got to figure out how to stop Lamar Jackson, especially if you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah, but that was great to see. That was really great to see. I mean, I thought the Patriots were going to come out and win the game. All of a sudden, Lamar Jackson just runs wild and has a good game, and they win. It wasn't even a close game, to be honest with you. All right, this was BlitzCast number 81. I'm your host, Alex Kavtov, for my partner and co-host, Ed Hunt, and we'll come back next week. Thanks for listening. Take care.